it's like basically when talking about different future developments, you're taking a business model. You're changing and challenging the status quo, which people don't like, because it's a change that they probably are not prepared for and they don't want to have.
Welcome to the Long-Term Strategy Conference 2025 with my special guest, Carina Stöttner. Let's say, imagine you are an executive or consultant who has tried to get an organization to think about multiple scenarios in the future. You honestly believe it would help to think through and rehearse an unwanted outcome or two. Unfortunately, others don't think so. Instead, you faced opposition that wasn't really logical when you did make a try. It just didn't make sense to you. Instead, it came from an emotional place, as if they were so afraid of a terrible thing happening that they wouldn't even discuss it. I'm Francis Wade, conference host, and here today to tackle this thorny problem is Carina Stöttner. We'll be looking at structured methods to make it easy for teams to confront their worst fears. Welcome to the Long-Term Strategy Conference 2025.
Thanks so much for having me.
Great. Well, Carina, it's great to have you. Folks, let me tell you a little bit about Carina. She is a futurist, entrepreneur, and science communicator. As the co-founder and former CEO of Themis Foresight, she worked with top executives on the future of European industries. Today, she helps companies become future ready by guiding leaders from strategic thinking to true futures thinking. And it's really an honor to have her here. I think, Carina, are you in Italy?
I'm in Italy currently, but I'm based like half in Italy, half in Germany.
Excellent. And that'll play into our story just a little bit, folks. So let me tell you a story to get us going. It's about Christine. She is the CEO of a Canadian company. In the year before a major presidential election in the United States, she happens to have a German background, which she relies on heavily to make logical decisions, especially when others become anxious. The family owned company she runs has 5,000 employees and has been around for 85 years. Before arriving in Canada, she led a German subsidiary, so she's experienced. However, at a recent board meeting, someone mentioned the chances that a president who is very pro tariff might be elected. The president shall remain unnamed. This set off a firestorm of disagreement in the boardroom. She tried to remain neutral, but some board members and family owners took things very seriously and refused to discuss the issue any further. And this set off some major alarms for her. Why? Well, folks, she's been in two situations in the past where companies disregarded technology trends and ended up going out of business. In her mind, this is just another trend that might shape the future and therefore chase them out of business. At the end of the meeting, she felt as if she didn't have the language or the mental model to make a persuasive case to think about the potential challenge more deeply. So naturally, she wonders, is there a way to do this more skillfully? So, Karina, is this something that you have seen before, witnessed firsthand? Tell us.
A lot of times, actually, Francis. Like on the one hand, of course, in my work life, where I work with board members and executives to think strategically about the future and make plans for the future. But also when you talk to family and friends, they know you're a futurist. They kind of, want to talk with you about the future. And usually when you tell them about the future, they're always getting emotional in a way. Because either they have very wishful thinking when it comes to talking up negative prospects. If there's something ahead, like such president, for example, could potentially become president, they always come out with ideas like, what if he, falls sick beforehand and he won't become president? I mean, You can think about that, but the chances
wishful thinking.
wishful thinking at the end of the day. Or on the other hand, like either people have like this wishful thinking, or on the other hand, they have this complete dystopian picture of the future, mostly connected to technology. Because mostly when we're confronted with the future, we see it in science fiction or in the media, and media follows a certain dynamic. Negative headlines click better. They are like the news under enormous economic pressure. So usually people have those either completely wishful thinking about the future, or like this dystopian image of the future. And both are kind of wrong. The future will neither be black or white. It will be all shades of gray, everything in between, but hardly completely dystopian or utopian. And so people, when you talk to them about the future and they come with this wishful thinking, like it's not going to happen, this pro-tariff president, I don't want to think about it. I think where it comes from is that they're kind of afraid of what would happen if. So it's a bit a fear, it's an emotion coming up, even though the argument itself can be discussed rationally. What holds them back is always this emotional part. Same for the dystopian.
Right.
It's this fear that stimulates our thinking, this negative thinking that things will go into the wrong direction. And also it's change. Every
Right.
every future outlook is change, and people don't like change.
Right. So change management focuses on many of the different kinds of emotions and reactions that we have to a possible change. So that's a whole discipline in and of itself. Once you've decided that a change should be undertaken, how do you make it happen given that you have the commitment? But here in strategy, we haven't even made the commitment yet. We're just entertaining the idea that maybe future A might happen versus future B. And the unwillingness to even go that far is a bit odd, isn't it? Because it's not happening necessarily. It may never happen. And are people, are we really so, how can I say, emotionally wired that we have a difficulty creating distance between an imagined future and where we are now? Is it that we don't have a certain kind of resilience, or is this just or humanity showing up at this very odd moment? Because I could imagine that in the case of our protagonist, that she was shocked in the moment. And Christine, she mentions this thing, and all of a sudden she gets this weird reaction, which she didn't prepare for, right? She didn't think that it could go that way, because I guess in other settings, let's imagine that her board is a rational board. It's not a ridiculous board. It's a good Canadian board, right? They're good thinkers. But in a moment, all of a sudden, she's triggered something that is a total surprise, that in her mind shouldn't even be happening. Because folks, it's not real. If we're just talking about what we're going to do if, and to get the kind of adverse reaction is even, and the funny thing is that half of the people who didn't want to do it could have been dystopian, as you said, or they could have been wishful thinkers. But the result is the same. We're not going to talk about it.
Yeah.
Which is even weirder, isn't it?
It is. But I think, so usually, you said this board usually is very rational, right? Rational when it comes probably to operative discussions, where we're both speaking, or all of them are speaking about the here and now. We're discussing numbers in those operative meetings. When Christine, our protagonist, now comes in, she's wearing, I'd say, a different thinking cap. She's in this outlook, big picture thinking now, while the other board members might be in the here and now. Why bother about the future when we have a crisis going on right now? We have to solve this, the budgets have to be planned for that. There is some failure in machine number 6 yesterday, how are we going to solve that? So I think on the one hand, in that moment, times of conflict, the two of them, or the board and Christine, are on different modes of thinking. That's the first problem. And while the one
Right.
thinks strategically, the other one is thinking in, in operational tasks right now. So I think those don't contradict themselves. It's just you have to switch. You have to be able to switch when you're in a board. And I think that's the first problem, that people are sometimes talking about different things at the same time, on different timelines. And then emotionally, as you said, it's very challenging for Christine, but probably also for the others. Because the one might feel it as an attack of the here and now. So they are presented with a problem they feel like they can't do anything about. They can't change the elections, right? So they feel like paralyzed. That's a lot of times when we present people with sort of negative images of the futures, and you want to like alert them there's something happening, the opposite is true. Instead of being alerted and coming into action, they get paralyzed because they feel like, well, if this is going to happen, if this is like a set future, why should I bother changing anything about my behavior anyways? I can't avoid it anymore. You know, same with the climate change, by the way. A lot of times when people read about the climate change, instead of taking action to change something about it, our brain registers that as, it's bound to happen anyway, so I can continue to drive my diesel car, I can continue to waste stuff, because the future is about to be this negative image of the future anyway. So it isn't always helpful to confront people with this argument of this is what could happen. And some people, that's another problem, don't even see it as a possible future, but as a set future. So I think there's a lot of different problems going on at the same time in that board.
Oh boy, I'm feeling the weight of them, because as a strategist, thinking about the future is often this good thing. You know, we're all like thinking about the great things that can happen. We like that space in the world that I come from, and you know, people attending the conference, when we're building strategies for other people, they're usually happy strategies. You know, we're not we're not we don't delve a heck of a lot or enough into futures that we need to contend with, that are not like our happy space. So we have a tendency to want to be creative for the things that we want, as opposed to being creative about the things that we don't want. So the feeling I have is that we're not prepared to engage in scary futures, or futures that we don't want. It's not a part of our training.
No.
Hence her surprise. It's not like we're anticipating and prepping and rehearsing, and we know we're going to say this if this happens and that. It's not it's not a space that we know to move into readily, which then causes a bigger problem, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you deal with unwanted futures, it's getting out of your comfort zone. But the thing is, if you don't deal with them, the problem is becoming even bigger, right? Because then you're confronted like very abruptly with a change that is so massive that it's not just like, it doesn't just affect one little part of your business, it might affect your entire business. Like in that case of a Canadian company, it's not just, you don't just throw some digitalization at the problem, or you throw some little minor efficiency work at the problem. It's like a systemic problem you have all of a sudden if you can't export your goods anymore, right?
Right. I could imagine we could have put something in this case that said that they had advance warning. So they had a report from a think tank, and the think tank was predicting a high tariffs in the future. We could have thrown that in there, right? And had her present the report and have them all reject it, saying, "Oh no, we're not going to talk about. We don't care who studied the report. We don't care who put together the prediction. Let's move on to the next item in the agenda." And they would have happily moved on in for the two reasons you said, wishful thinking and dystopia, they would have happily could have happily moved on, even if they had facts that were telling them the opposite. Very hard to do for those of us who are strategic planners who might be seeing this in the moment and realizing that, hang on a minute, if there's anything to that report, if that report is based on data, then it's not a good idea for us to skip over it. We do need to confront it, and we need to talk about it, and then we need to incorporate it in our thinking, because we can kind of see the logic, but seeing the logic doesn't necessarily help us to know what to say in the moment, does it?
The interesting thing is there's a couple of studies from a psychological aspect on that, saying that rational arguments, if you don't believe in that argument already and someone comes with more arguments for that, it even drives the polarization. So none of the studies that you can
That's
present
terrible.
could change your mind. So it's even the opposite effect. There's a backfire effect on it. It's called biased assimilation study, meaning you believe the study that confirms your ideas. You believe in that, but if you read a study of the opposite arguments, it confirms your bias on the other side even more. Meaning you still believe the wrong thing, whatever the right or the wrong thing is in that case. You still believe what you already thought before, and the polarization is becoming even bigger. So rational arguments don't help at all. They only help the ones who already believe that there might be a pro-tariff president. But for the other side that doesn't want to be confronted with that thought, it makes makes it even the problem even bigger.
Carina, this is terrible news because we're, in the back of, I know our audience listening, right? In the back of our minds, we're thinking, oh, I think I could convince them. You're saying that all logical arguments make things worse. This is terrible. This is maybe this explains what happened in Canada at scale, because there was in the recent past there were very high tariffs that were placed on Canada, and there was warning beforehand. It didn't come all the way out of nowhere, and companies were caught, napping. They didn't believe it was actually going to happen at scale, and when it happened, there was a shock. So this, of course, this actually had happened, but those that had information or had an opportunity to consider it, and they probably used a lot of logic as they were considering it, without realizing that the use of logic in that way, the use of persuasive techniques, uh, only made the resistance even worse. Probably didn't realize that. Oh my goodness.
I mean, I think that's a problem we have on a societal level right now, right? Like you always try to convince the other side, whatever the other side is, to believe in the right thing, whatever the right thing is. But by trying to persuade them with just rational arguments, we're reaching the opposite effect.
I know you've gone beyond. Thankfully, you've gone beyond this problem, and folks, you should know that Carina has a sociology background, in addition to a background as someone who's an expert in strategic foresight. So she combines disciplines, and she had a moment she shared with me when she had the problem actually happen to her. Karina, can you share the situation you went through, and kind of how you sort of found a way to think about this challenge that you're now going to share with us? Can you take us through the sequence of events?
Yes. So I had a strategy project with a board of a bigger company in Germany. And we came in, we did our research, what kind of developments, especially technologically, might happen in the future. And they were all backed up. Everything was fine. And we were in a room full of like those board members with the chairman being present. And we were discussing those future trends And I could see that the chairman was getting more and more, not in a rage, but like you could see that he was upset a bit. He felt like I confronted him with something. And up to a certain point where I was really afraid we might probably get kicked out of the meeting room, because we just kept going and he kept being more angry. And at some point he said, well, he doesn't believe in that. He doesn't believe in all the trends and all the developments, because basically he's been in the company, like it's a family-owned business, for the last 20 years. Their major business model, which is based on something else, so the technology or the technological trend would basically affect their business model in their core. Their business model has been working very well for the past 20 years. Why shouldn't it work in the future? And he doesn't believe in that big change. He knows that a lot of people are talking about it. He's reading the news, obviously. It's all over. Like, you don't have to be the wisest person in the room to know that this might happen at some point. But he says he's pretty sure they're all wrong and everyone is running in the wrong direction, which, is one of the possible futures, but 90% of the other possible futures might go into the other direction. So you should be prepared for either way, right? At least think about it.
Right. Right.
And basically, in the beginning, we wanted to have a follow-up project, but that was canceled then. And I had a feeling it was because of that meeting, where we nearly got kicked out. I mean, obviously. And I was thinking about it for a very long time. And only when I met him again 2 years later, we kind of touched on the topic. And I found out that he wasn't really happy, that basically, well, we might have, humiliated him a bit in front of the rest of the team, saying that his core business model doesn't work anymore. I think he didn't say it that way, but you could feel it in the words. In some way, it also, I also realized we attacked his core identity. It was a family-owned business, so this has always been the business. We attacked this identity that is very closely connected to the company. It's basically, when talking about different future developments, you're attacking a business model. You're changing and challenging the status quo, which people don't like, because it's a change that they probably are not prepared for and they don't want to have, which I understand. Nobody wants big changes. Nobody wants to question whether this entire thing, people like board members want to question little things like, is this still the most efficient process? Is this still the best marketing approach? But what you do in foresight and in futures, if you do a job well, is you attack the entire system. You question and challenge the entire system. And that, especially in businesses where executives have been part of for a very long time, is also attacking them in a way. And that feels bad for them. And that's why they're not happy with you,
Wow. It's amazing to me that he said humiliated. It
wasn't his words, but
I'm like speechless. The way he said it. Okay, that was the impression conveyed.
Yeah.
It's astounding to me, because we strategic planning, I think of us as the good guys. So to hear that we might be taken as the bad guys because we are questioning their faith in what they have done is hard to hear. Boy, it's like, it makes me wonder about projects I've been on. But thankfully, you're here to tell us what we should be doing, instead of just going in blind, unprepared, and just kind of assuming we're the good guys, only to find out that they don't necessarily think that way, because we ask them to consider a different way of doing things. Wow. But how should we prepare ourselves for working with these clients, Carina? How should we prepare ourselves and prepare them?
I think the most important thing, what I learned in the past 4 years, is to build trust, because you can't attack, as I said, when the business and the personality and the identity are so much interwoven. The person you advise needs to trust you. So the most important thing is building up trust. And that might work very differently in a lot of different cultures. Like in some cultures, you go out, have a drink together. In some cultures, you share some personal information. In other cultures, you kind of show that your work that is doing, the work that they're doing is really good. So you have a, proof of concept sort of. So trust is the fundament, and that doesn't work over a Zoom call usually. That doesn't work over, like 1 or 2 LinkedIn exchanges. That usually has to build up gradually over a project. So I think that's the most fundamental one. And then you also have to see if everyone in the room, in the project, is actually on board and on the same page, because some people might be already very open for more, like Christine, for example, in our story. She might be already very open to the future, but the rest of the board is in a different thinking mode, sort of. So you first have to bring them on the same page. So we sometimes work with narratives or with future stories, or kind of try to bring people into a thinking mode where they let go of the here and now for the moment and open themselves up to think hypothetically for the beginning about the future. And then you have to create a setting in which everyone is fine, and that differs from company to company, to also open up like a bit emotionally. I mean, you don't have to share your deepest secrets, of course, but like also address what everyone's fear around that change, for example, is. Like, let's talk about AI, for example. Some people are super excited about the possibilities of AI, and others in the exact same room are probably afraid because they've read news about AI taking over the world, or AI that you have to let go of people because AI might replace them. So you have different emotions in a room connected to a trend, and to tease that out shouldn't be in a like 10 minutes exercise, but should really take the time needed to bring everyone on the same page also emotionally. And only then you can go into those thought experiments. And for the beginning, I always try to be as hypothetically as possible. So try to open up to the possibility that there are different futures, because a lot of people think in a linear future. So go into hypothetical futures before you talk about actual futures that will affect or could affect their business. And then, only then, you can come up with a very uncomfortable future. But you need a lot of, work beforehand to make that happen, because otherwise you're losing people before the project even started. So the content for me is at the very end.
So you're talking about a process of like a trust building process that allows you or gives you the permission at the very end to explore their worst fears, so to speak. Wow. Of course, I'm thinking about my work. No, how could I have done that differently? I'm looking back at projects and thinking, I never, because for me it's so abstract. When I'm working on strategy, and their current business model to me is an abstraction that I don't feel any emotional connection to. So I don't imagine that they have one also. And now as you speak, I can see that if I go too far into exploring the worst fears, then that I would trigger that reaction, that opposition that you talked about, that even the humiliation, all of the range of emotions, and that there's something to do with the way I prepare them to have hard conversations that I need to take care of, so that I build trust along the way, one step after the other. It's like a staircase approach. Is that what you're describing?
Yeah, absolutely. And it might look very different in every company, because every board is also so different. Like, not just in age and gender, and but from the standpoint of view. Sometimes you have very young people who are very afraid of the future, who are very afraid of change. Sometimes you have old, experienced people who are very open. Usually our stereotype is the other way around, but it's not about, like, everyone's on a different page. Everyone has made different experiences, and you gotta, before you start working, like, on scenarios, for example, you have to keep that in mind.
Well, Karina, you're so onto something here that's important for people in our profession, whether they're strategists or professionals in strategic foresight or futurists. It it it's it in particular, the way you speak of it has resonance today, because again, this was a Canadian company, and of all the companies in any country in the world, the Canadian companies are having the worst time of it right now. Um, Given that they've lost the partnership that they had in the United States, the solidity and the trust that they've had for decades, and that they've built their businesses around, and all of a sudden it's not there for them the way it used to. So it's a super emotional time for them.
Yeah.
And to think that following your approach, it would have helped a year ago
Yeah.
to actually follow the steps that you're taking to build the trust, that could have actually saved many companies from the hard time that they're going through now. It's very sobering, don't you think?
Yeah. And I think it's very important what you just said. Now the emotions are running high, like, because the crisis is here. So it's even tougher now to deal with all those emotions, because people are under stress and under a lot of financial pressure. While a year ago, the financial pressure was less than now, at least, I hope. Still emotional, but the emotions would have been different and probably easier to deal with. Now, under stress, it's the worst time to think about futures. I always try to describe it with like a hurricane. There's like I once read a study about what kind of people and companies, but mostly was about people, survive crises like a hurricane. And it's mostly people that manage to go through 3 stages. The first stage is to come out of this normality bias, meaning telling yourself nothing will change, the world will stay the same. As the faster you come out of that into phase 2, the better. And the second stage is actually to have several plans how to escape out of a crisis. So if a hurricane is already over your house and you only think about a strategy to escape now, it's probably too bad already, right? So ideally, you came up with three different strategies before the hurricane reached your house, which usually, you can anticipate more or less. And then the third one is, the third phase is obviously then acting on one of the strategies you've built up on early on, not just when the hurricane is already there. But yeah, I think a lot of companies didn't acknowledge the hurricane, and it's very hard for them to deal with the hurricane while in the midst of it. So yeah, and the next hurricane is going to come. That's also very predictable. We probably don't know which one, but we can anticipate that there might be different ones,
Oh, well, folks, as you know, I'm here in Jamaica, in the hurricane zone, hurricane capital of the world here in the Caribbean. So that analogy is particularly apt. So, Karina, we're at the end of our time. I can't believe it, but how can folks hear more about you? How can they find? I know they can find you on LinkedIn. So, folks, it's Karina,
I post a lot on LinkedIn,
and her last name is
Stottner. Yes.
And your website. Oh, so you share your website for us so that we'll know.
Yeah, it's also Carina-Stöttner.de.
Excellent. Carina Stöttner, thanks for joining us at the Strategy Conference, Long-Term Strategy Conference 2025. It's been a sobering experience, and I'm looking back at the way I deliver strategy to my clients and wondering how I need to change what I do, because I don't want them to miss conversations about the future because I didn't do my job the way I could have.
Exactly. So it's a pity for all the good research that is out there.
Exactly. So, folks, if you enjoyed this conversation with Carina, drop a note in one of our spaces to let others know that they should go listen to this video before the conference is over. And Thanks so much for joining us and see you in a different video. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Karina.